Hey guys, tonight we slip back in time. Way back so far that your comfy bed and electric blanket wouldn't even be a fever dream yet. You're lying on a lumpy straw mattress inside a smoky thatched hut. The air is thick, scratchy on your throat, and it smells like damp hay mixed with last night's cabbage stew. Chickens rustle in the corner because, yes, you share your sleeping quarters with livestock. You probably won't survive this long term, but hey, that's the fun of our little journey. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push the rough wool blanket aside, feeling straw prickle your skin. The rafters overhead are blackened with soot because chimneys aren't standard yet. The smoke just curls around inside until it decides to leak out through the thatch. Your eyes sting, but this is just life. The hearth in the center of the room is still faintly glowing from last night's fire. Embers hidden under ash, waiting to be coaxed alive for the day's cooking. When you sit up, the first thing you notice is the cold. It seeps through the cracks in the wattle and daub walls, nips your toes, and makes you wish for socks. But socks aren't a medieval peasant luxury. You get scratchy wool wrappings if you're lucky, and frostbite if you're not. Still, you pull yourself upright, brushing straw off your tunic. The rooster outside is already crowing, and no, there's no snooze button. Historians still argue whether peasants really relied on roosters or church bells as morning alarms, but either way, you're not sleeping in. You duck through the low wooden doorway into the misty morning. The village path is more mud than path, slick with last night's rain, and your shoes, really just leather bags tied with cord, soak through instantly. You're awake now, no coffee required. The village is stirring. Smoke rises from other thatched cottages, thin trails against the dawn fog. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks and is immediately shushed. You catch the scent of fresh manure because, let's be honest, medieval villages were basically giant open-air petting zoos without the hand sanitizer. Your stomach growls, but food will come later. For now, you join neighbors already pulling tools out from sheds and leading oxen toward the fields. Everyone is moving together because the rhythm of village life is communal. You pass by the church at the village center, its small bell tower catching the first rays of sun. The bell hasn't rung yet today, but it soon will, marking time in a world where clocks are scarce. A fun tidbit: some places rang the curfew bell at night, telling villagers to cover their hearths with ash for safety. The word curfew literally comes from couvre-feu, meaning cover the fire. As you stretch your stiff back, you notice how different sleep feels here. Historians still argue whether medieval people practiced segmented sleep, waking for an hour or two in the middle of the night to pray, talk, or even sneak over to a neighbor's hut for a chat. You may have done that too without realizing, waking up in the smoky dark, listening to the crackle of the hearth, then drifting back for your second sleep. You rub your eyes, still gritty, and smile at the thought. Modern folks call this insomnia. In the Middle Ages, totally normal. On the edge of the village, you stop to tie your belt. The cord is fraying, but it keeps your tunic together. Around you, villagers are already trading jokes to lighten the day. Someone teases that your hair looks like you lost a fight with a goose. And honestly, they're not wrong. Medieval bedhead is undefeated. A woman carries a bucket of water from the communal well, sloshing half of it out as she goes. The water is murky, but that's the daily drink unless you flavor it with ale or herbs. Quirky fact: many villagers used to drop heated stones into buckets to purify water. Basically, medieval life hacks that didn't quite work, but made you feel proactive. Your hands ache from yesterday's field work, but today, you'll do it again. That's life here: repetitive, physical, and strangely grounding. Yet, as you glance up, you see the manor house looming in the distance, stone walls dark against the morning light. It reminds you that while you work the soil, someone else is counting the rent. The hierarchy is literally built into the landscape. Still, for now, you breathe in the foggy air, earthy and damp. The village wakes beside you, people coughing, animals bleeding, the steady rhythm of survival. And you keep walking, bare feet damp, breath puffing white, ready to start another ordinary, extraordinary day in the 13th century. A passing child waves at you with sticky fingers, probably honey stolen from last night's treat. You wave back, knowing the day will be long, but never entirely dull. After all, even here, life has its small jokes. Like the one about medieval mattresses. If you hear crunching, don't panic. It's probably just the mice who also consider your straw bed their Airbnb. Cozy, right? And so, step by step, you head into the misty morning, the village slowly unfolding around you like a forgotten dream you're just beginning to remember.
Hey guys, tonight we slip back in time, way back, so far that your comfy bed and electric blanket wouldn't even be a fever dream yet. You're lying on a lumpy straw mattress inside a smoky, thatched hut. The air is thick, scratchy on your throat, and it smells like damp hay mixed with last night's cabbage stew. Chickens rustle in the corner because, yes, you share your sleeping quarters with livestock. You probably won't survive this long term, but hey, that's the fun of our little journey. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push the rough wool blanket aside, feeling straw prickle your skin. The rafters overhead are blackened with soot because chimneys aren't standard yet. The smoke just curls around inside until it decides to leak out through the thatch. Your eyes sting, but this is just life. The hearth in the center of the room is still faintly glowing from last night's fire, embers hidden under ash, waiting to be coaxed alive for the day's cooking. When you sit up, the first thing you notice is the cold. It seeps through the cracks in the wattle and daub walls, nips your toes, and makes you wish for socks. But socks aren't a medieval peasant luxury. You get scratchy wool wrappings if you're lucky, and frostbite if you're not. Still, you pull yourself upright, brushing straw off your tunic. The rooster outside is already crowing, and no, there's no snooze button. Historians still argue whether peasants really relied on roosters or church bells as morning alarms. But either way, you're not sleeping in. You duck through the low wooden doorway into the misty morning. The village path is more mud than path, slick with last night's rain, and your shoes, really just leather bags tied with cord, soak through instantly. You're awake now, no coffee required. The village is stirring. Smoke rises from other thatched cottages, thin trails against the dawn fog. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks and is immediately shooshed. You catch the scent of fresh manure because, let's be honest, medieval villages were basically giant, open-air petting zoos without the hand sanitizer. Your stomach growls, but food will come later. For now, you join neighbors already pulling tools out from sheds and leading oxen toward the fields. Everyone is moving together because the rhythm of village life is communal. You pass by the church at the village center, its small bell tower catching the first rays of sun. The bell hasn't rung yet today, but it soon will, marking time in a world where clocks are scarce. A fun tidbit. Some places rang the curfew bell at night, telling villagers to cover their hearths with ash for safety. The word curfew literally comes from couvre-feu, meaning cover the fire. As you stretch your stiff back, you notice how different sleep feels here. Historians still argue whether medieval people practiced segmented sleep, waking for an hour or two in the middle of the night to pray, talk, or even sneak over to a neighbor's hut for a chat. You may have done that too without realizing, waking up in the smoky dark, listening to the crackle of the hearth, then drifting back for your second sleep. You rub your eyes, still gritty, and smile at the thought. Modern folks call this insomnia. In the Middle Ages? Totally normal. On the edge of the village, you stop to tie your belt. The cord is fraying, but it keeps your tunic together. Around you, villagers are already trading jokes to lighten the day. Someone teases that your hair looks like you lost a fight with a goose, and honestly, they're not wrong. Medieval bedhead is undefeated. A woman carries a bucket of water from the communal well, sloshing half of it out as she goes. The water is murky, but that's the daily drink unless you flavor it with ale or herbs. Quirky fact: many villagers used to drop heated stones into buckets to purify water. Basically, medieval life hacks that didn't quite work but made you feel proactive. Your hands ache from yesterday's field work, but today you'll do it again. That's life here. Repetitive, physical, and strangely grounding. Yet, as you glance up, you see the manor house looming in the distance, stone walls dark against the morning light. It reminds you that while you work the soil, someone else is counting the rent. The hierarchy is literally built into the landscape. Still, for now, you breathe in the foggy air, earthy and damp. The village wakes beside you, people coughing, animals bleating, the steady rhythm of survival. And you keep walking, bare feet damp, breath puffing white, ready to start another ordinary, extraordinary day in the 13th century. Often it's just 2 bigger meals, with snacks scavenged in between if you're lucky. You lick the spoon, wipe your hands on your tunic, and stretch. Despite the monotony, there's comfort in this rhythm. The bread, the porridge, the weak ale, they're constants in a world where storms can wipe out crops and lords can demand higher rents without warning. And hey, at least breakfast hasn't killed you yet. Unlike that crocodile dung sunscreen the ancient Egyptians once used, we're still laughing about that, right? Compared to that, a mouthful of gritty porridge feels like a Michelin star meal. The empty bowl clunks as you set it aside. Your belly feels warmer, your hands steadier. Around you, the chatter fades into the rustle of movement as villagers drift toward the fields. Work calls always. And so, fueled by grain and ale, you follow. You shuffle out toward the open fields, that weak ale buzzing faintly in your belly. Not enough to make you stumble, but enough to make the mud look slightly less depressing. The ground squelches under your worn shoes as you trudge alongside neighbors, everyone lugging tools that look more like medieval torture devices than farm equipment. A wooden plow creaks on its yoke, attached to a pair of oxen who clearly resent their life choices as much as you do. The air smells of damp earth, manure, and smoke carried from village hearths. You cough once, pulling your cloak tighter, and join the long procession of peasants stepping onto the open strips of land. These aren't neat, square farms like modern times, oh no. The land is divided into long strips in an open field system. Each villager has a few scattered strips, making farming both a community affair and an endless headache when your best patch happens to be right beside your enemies. Historians still argue whether this system encouraged cooperation or just fueled resentment, but either way, you don't get much of a choice. You heft a wooden hoe, the shaft smooth from years of use, and start breaking soil. The ground is stubborn, clumpy, and littered with roots. Behind you, oxen drag the heavy plow, splitting furrows while men shout and curse at the animals in a mix of desperation and affection. You can't help but laugh when one ox decides it's quitting early, plopping down in the mud like a toddler refusing to move. And speaking of toddlers, there are children everywhere. Too small to plow, but big enough to scatter seeds or chase away crows. One boy flaps his arms and yells "shoo" at a cluster of birds, but the crows stare him down with all the menace of seasoned bullies. Finally, he throws a clod of dirt, misses completely, and tumbles backward into the furrow. You grin. Entertainment is free out here. The work is steady, monotonous, but vital. Grain is life. Rye, barley, wheat if the soil is good. You feel the weight of each seed as you toss it into the freshly carved furrows. It's not just food, it's survival, hope, and next winter's bread. The rhythm takes over. Dig, scatter, cover, repeat. Sweat pricks your neck despite the chill morning air. Someone nearby starts singing a rough field tune. The melody is simple, repetitive, and designed to keep pace with the work. Others join in, and before long the fields echo with voices, half music, half groan. Fun fact, these communal songs sometimes carried hidden complaints about taxes or lords, tucked between the verses. It's basically medieval folk rock protest music. Your neighbor nudges you, muttering about the reeve, the village official who makes sure work gets done and rents get paid. The reeve is already walking the fields with a stick in hand, making notes of who's slacking. Quirky tidbit. Sometimes reeves were chosen from among the peasants themselves, which meant one of your neighbors suddenly had the job of tattling on everyone else. You can imagine how popular that made them at parties. You pause, leaning on your hoe, and glance toward the manor house looming in the distance. It feels like the Lord is watching even when he isn't. The labor here, the sweat, the aching backs, it all feeds into his granaries first. Only after his share is taken can you hope to keep enough to survive. Someone grumbles about the last tax increase, another curses the weather, and someone else mutters darkly about next year being better. Hope, apparently, is the cheapest crop to sow. The sun climbs higher, drying the mist. Fields stretch wide, patched with strips of green and brown, dotted with bent figures who look like moving ants. You shift your weight, your lower back protesting loudly. Medieval farming doesn't exactly come with ergonomic seating. A neighbor tells a joke about a monk who tried to plow but gave up after one furrow, saying, "God clearly wanted me for prayer, not for plows." Everyone chuckles even though the laughter is thin. It's easier to laugh at monks than at your own calluses. The oxen strain against their yokes again, grunting. Their breath clouds in the air. Someone shouts encouragement, or maybe just swears, while another man whacks the plow to keep it upright. Farming here isn't just toil, it's teamwork mixed with chaos. You all depend on one another, even when you'd rather trip your neighbor into the mud. Every so often you wipe sweat from your forehead with the back of your sleeve, smearing dirt across your skin. Hands blister, shoulders ache, but the rows slowly multiply, neat lines across the land. Time blurs. Work in the fields isn't measured in hours, but in furrows, and in how many times you mutter, "Is it almost mealtime?" By late morning, you straighten up, stretching until your spine cracks. Around you, villagers pause too, leaning on tools, taking a moment to breathe. You all stare at the horizon, the same thought in your minds. How much longer until the bell calls you back? Despite everything, there's a strange beauty here. The golden haze of sunlight, the sweep of fields, the steady heartbeat of human and oxen labor. It feels timeless. Your footprints join thousands before and thousands after. And somehow, even though your hands are raw, you find yourself smiling at the absurdity of it all. Because yes, your bread tomorrow depends on these aching arms today. But at least you got a front row seat to that ox's strike earlier. And honestly, who wouldn't pay to watch a giant animal sit down and protest while peasants scold it like a sulky teenager? So you keep sowing, step by step, furrow by furrow. The field stretches on, endless, but the rhythm holds you steady. Work is life, and life is work. The fields fade behind you as the day edges forward, and now your path leads toward the looming stone structure that dominates everything. The manor. It rises above the thatched cottages like a silent reminder of who really owns the land beneath your feet. The timbered huts look like toys compared to its cold gray walls, its arrow slits glaring down like judgmental eyes. You can practically hear it whisper, "You may sweat and sow, but all of this is mine first." You trudge up the dirt path with others, tools slung over shoulders, mud caked on shoes. At the gate, two guards lounge with spears. They don't look particularly threatening, but the spears are pointy enough to end most arguments before they start. You nod respectfully as you pass, the medieval version of "Don't tase me, bro." The manor hall itself is both impressive and underwhelming, depending on your expectations. From the outside, it's squat and rectangular. Thick walls of stone meant more for practicality than beauty. Inside, though, is where the hierarchy is carved into every beam. You step into a cavernous hall, the kind of space that makes you feel both tiny and very aware of your muddy boots. At the far end, raised on a dais, sits the Lord's chair, a glorified wooden throne, maybe cushioned with fur. The table in front of him stretches long, meant for feasts and displays of wealth. High ceilings arch overhead, blackened with smoke from the central hearth, where logs the size of small trees crackle and spit. And dangling from rafters are hunting trophies, antlers, pelts, maybe a boar's head, all reminders that the Lord gets the best spoils. You glance around. The floors are strewn with rushes, bundles of reeds sprinkled with herbs to mask the less than pleasant smells. Quirky fact: sometimes these rushes weren't replaced for months, and all sorts of extras accumulated in them. Food scraps, fleas, the occasional bone. Medieval carpet, practical, aromatic, and mildly alive. Servants scurry about carrying jugs of ale and trays of bread. Their movements are brisk, practiced. You notice the hierarchy even here. The Lord and his family sit closest to the hearth, basking in warmth, while lower guests or officials are pushed further down the table, inching toward the drafty doorway. Historians still argue whether the seating order was strictly enforced or more fluid depending on the occasion, but one thing's clear: you aren't climbing past the halfway mark. You edge along the wall, watching. The Lord's steward, a sharp-eyed man with a ledger, is busy checking deliveries: sacks of grain, smoked fish, baskets of apples. Every item is counted and recorded because this isn't just wealth, it's power, stored and guarded. Your own back aches at the thought of how many furrows of grain it took to fill even one of those sacks. A servant offers you a cup of watered wine. You take it, sip, and nearly choke. It's sour, sharp, nothing like the smooth stuff you've imagined. Medieval wine was often so rough it had to be spiced or diluted to be drinkable. But hey, it beats muddy water. You overhear a conversation between two retainers arguing about taxes owed this year. One insists the yield was poor because of the late rains. The other says it doesn't matter. The Lord's share is fixed. That's the harsh truth. Famine or plenty, the Lord gets his due first. Your neighbors joke that he could tax the air if he figured out a way to measure it. And honestly, give him a few years.
Still, there's grandeur here. On the walls hang tapestries, colorful if a bit faded, depicting hunting scenes, saints, maybe even mythical beasts. They serve both as insulation and propaganda. Look at our lineage, our bravery, our holy piety. You stare at one showing a knight spearing a dragon and wonder if the Lord secretly commissions these to make himself look like a hero, when in reality, he mostly counts rent. Near the dais, musicians pluck lutes and fiddles. The melody is thin, cheerful, trying to convince everyone this is a place of joy and not just of obligation. You notice how carefully the servants laugh at the Lord's jokes, how quickly they jump when he gestures. The shadow of power isn't just cast by stone walls. It's in the way people hold their breath when the Lord clears his throat. And yet, outside this hall, the villagers gossip about him like any boss. Too greedy, too lazy, too fond of hunting while others starve. Historians still argue whether lords were benevolent protectors or ruthless exploiters, but the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Sometimes generous, sometimes cruel, always holding the upper hand. You drain the last sip of wine, grimacing at the aftertaste. The hall is warm, heavy with smoke and roasting meat. You catch a whiff of venison turning on a spit. Meat you won't taste unless you're invited to a feast. The smell makes your stomach twist with envy. At your cottage, it'll be cabbage again. A servant drops a jug nearby, spilling ale across the rushes. For a tense moment, silence falls. All eyes flick to the Lord. He frowns, then waves a hand dismissively. The servant exhales in relief, but you can see the tremor in his hands as he cleans up. One small mistake here can ruin a life, because punishment flows downward fast. Stocks in the village square, fines, or worse. You step back toward the doorway, the draft reminding you where you belong. Outside, the air feels fresher, though colder. Behind you, the manor hall hums with power and privilege, its very stones pressing down on the lives of everyone in the village. Still, you can't help but smirk. The Lord may have tapestries, meat, and fine wine, but he'll never know the joy of finding that one warm spot in your straw mattress. Call it a peasant's victory. Small, scratchy, and maybe flea-ridden, but still yours. You wander back toward the heart of the village, and the quiet rhythm of fields and manor life suddenly gives way to a burst of sound and smell. The market. It isn't a grand city bazaar with silks and jewels. This is a cluster of wooden stalls, carts, and blankets spread over muddy ground. But for you and your neighbors, it's the social hub, the day's entertainment, and the best chance of finding something new in a life that doesn't change much. The air hits you first, thick with roasting fish, sweaty animals, and the sweet tang of apples. It's equal parts delicious and revolting, depending on which way the breeze blows. Children dart between legs, shrieking with laughter, while geese honk indignantly from wicker cages. Someone's pig has broken loose and is barreling down the lane, pursued by its red-faced owner. Medieval market rule number 1. Always watch your ankles. You pause at a bread stall, eyeing loaves stacked high. They're rough, brown, heavy, the sort you've eaten all week. But tucked off to the side is a small pile of white bread, sieved, delicate, and clearly meant for someone with coin to spare. You sigh and reach for the darker loaf. At the next stand, a woman offers onions, garlic, and turnips. The bulbs still have clumps of earth attached, proof they were pulled up just yesterday. She waves one under your nose and promises it's sweeter than your neighbor's gossip. Honestly, she's probably right. Further down, you pass a stall where cloth is displayed, wool dyed in muted reds and greens. The colors aren't rich like noble garments, but they brighten the muddy palette of everyday life. The dyer explains how he boiled madder roots for the red, and you nod politely while imagining how itchy that wool will feel once you're wearing it. A sharp voice suddenly cuts through the chatter. A peddler boasting about miracle knives that never dull. He demonstrates by hacking a carrot in two with theatrical flair. You can't help but grin. Historians still argue how often traveling salesmen passed through villages. But when they did, they were basically medieval YouTubers, half entertainment, half questionable product reviews. You continue weaving through the stalls. A barrel of salted herring makes your nose wrinkle. Fish is a staple here, especially with church rules limiting meat on fast days, but the smell could knock a grown knight flat. Still, people crowd around, coins clinking. And then, you spot trouble. Near the poultry stand, a commotion erupts. A goose, wings flapping, has disappeared under someone's cloak. Its furious honking gives the thief away instantly. The vendor shrieks, villagers laugh, and the would-be burglar gets smacked on the back until he drops the bird, which waddles off triumphantly, free as can be. You chuckle, making a mental note. Geese are louder than guard dogs, and probably just as mean. You take a moment to soak in the atmosphere. Voices overlap, bargaining rises and falls. A man insists his cheese is the best for miles, while his rival swears the opposite. Someone mutters about the weight of coins, suspicious that the moneyer's scale is rigged. Quirky fact, clipping coins, literally shaving off slivers of silver or gold, was a common scam, and punishable by death if caught. People squint hard at every penny here. By the village cross, a small crowd gathers around a traveling storyteller. He spins tales of distant lands, of saints and monsters, his arms sweeping wildly. Children gape, mouths open, while adults pretend not to care, but lean in anyway. Entertainment is rare, and even if half his stories are nonsense, the rhythm of his voice makes the mud fade for a while. A friar ambles through, alms box in hand, reminding everyone that charity is good for the soul. He gets a few coins, a lot of grumbles, and one onion tossed into his basket. He nods solemnly, as if this is exactly the donation he prayed for. You stop at a stall selling pottery. The jugs and bowls are simple, some chipped, some lopsided, but sturdy. You pick one up, feeling its weight, imagining it filled with ale back home. The potter beams, insisting it will last a lifetime. Given medieval life expectancy, you're inclined to believe him. The noise of haggling, the clatter of hooves, the bark of dogs, it's overwhelming but lively. Here, at least, you aren't just a bent figure in the fields. Here, you're part of a noisy, chaotic human swirl. And yet, the shadow of authority lingers. At the edge of the market, the reeve stands watch, ready to fine anyone caught cheating or stealing. His stern gaze sweeps the crowd, though you suspect even he laughed at the goose thief. Your stomach growls again as you pass a stall selling pies. The crusts are thick, the filling mysterious, and you're not sure if you're about to eat pork, pigeon, or whatever wandered into the trap last night. But hunger wins, and you bite in. It's hot, greasy, and surprisingly tasty. You don't ask questions. You lean against a post, chewing, while the market continues around you. The smells, the gossip, the laughter, even the petty squabbles, they stitch the village together as much as the church or the fields. Without this gathering, life would be only toil and silence. And just as you finish the last bite of pie, a chicken flutters up onto your shoulder, dropped by some distracted child. You freeze, unsure whether to laugh or panic. The bird pecks at your hair like it owns you. The crowd roars with laughter, and you can't help but laugh too. Welcome to Market Day. Equal parts survival, theater, and slapstick comedy. You leave the bustle of the market with a chunk of bread in your satchel and a chicken feather still stuck in your sleeve, and wander toward the cottages where women sit spinning and weaving. The rhythm of the market's noise fades into the steady hum of work. Wheels creaking, looms thumping, and the occasional muttered curse when thread tangles beyond patience. You step inside a cottage and are greeted by the scent of wool, damp, earthy, and faintly animal, as if the sheep never really left. A woman pulls a spindle through her fingers, twisting fibers into thread. The motion is hypnotic. Pull, twist, wind. Done so smoothly you wonder how many thousands of times she's repeated it. Beside her, a child pedals a small spinning wheel with determination, though his legs barely reach. You chuckle, thinking medieval childhood is basically unpaid apprenticeship with extra mud. Bundles of raw fleece pile in the corner. It's greasy with lanolin, still clinging with burrs and straw. You help pick some clean, plucking out thistles. Quirky tidbit. Lanolin is actually great for skin, so while your hands reek like wet sheep, they're softer than they've ever been. Call it the medieval spa treatment, eau de sheep. Once spun, the yarn is taken to the loom. You watch as threads stretch taut across the frame, a wooden shuttle sliding back and forth, back and forth. The loom creaks with every throw. The weaver's foot stomps the treadles, and slowly, fabric emerges. It's rough, scratchy, and destined to make you itch when winter comes, but it's also life-saving. Without this endless, repetitive craft, there'd be nothing between you and the cold except wishful thinking. Nearby, dyers tend cauldrons bubbling with colors. One vat steams a murky red, made from madder root. Another seeps into a dull yellow from welled plants. And then there's the strangest one. A pot of liquid that smells strongly of, well, urine. Because yes, stale urine was often used to fix dyes to fabric. You wrinkle your nose as a dyer stirs it cheerfully, as if he's concocting fine stew. Historians still argue how widespread this practice really was, but enough records exist to make you certain. Some of your future tunics will carry a fragrance best described as eau de medieval alleyway. You drift to a corner where women knotting thread gossip as busily as they weave. One mutters about her neighbor's stingy bread portions. Another speculates on who will marry whom, and a third sighs that the reeve cheats at dice. Work and talk are inseparable here. The cloth may bind your body, but gossip binds the village. Your hand brushes a finished piece of cloth hanging to dry. It's coarse, uneven, but surprisingly warm. You picture yourself in a new tunic, scratching less when frost creeps in, and smile. Of course, such fabric may never be yours. Much of it is destined for rent payments, sold off to merchants, or claimed by the Lord. Still, touching it feels like touching the future. Suddenly, there's laughter outside. You step into the sunlight to see a group of boys running with strips of dyed wool tied to sticks, waving them like flags. One trips, crashing into a puddle, and his flag splashes bright red. For a moment, the muddy lane looks like a battlefield. You laugh, shaking your head. Kids will weaponize anything, even yarn. Back inside, a spinner shows you a piece of linen. Unlike wool, it's made from flax fibers, smoother, cooler, harder to produce. Growing flax, soaking it, beating it, combing it. All tedious steps before it ever becomes cloth. She shrugs, saying linen is worth it for shirts in summer. You run your fingers over it, marveling at how much labor hides in a simple garment. Someone jokes that even kings get itchy wool underwear, so don't feel too bad about yours. You grin, comforted by the idea that rashes are the one equalizer between lord and peasant. As the sun lowers, you realize you've spent hours among fibers and dye pots, listening to looms and chatter. It's repetitive work, but strangely meditative. Every thread, every knot, every patch of color carries with it human touch, patience, and persistence. You help roll a bolt of finished cloth and heft it onto a shelf. Your arms ache, but there's satisfaction in it. Without these quiet crafts, the village would shiver naked, and the Lord would have nothing fine to drape on his shoulders. Stepping back outside, you breathe in air that smells, thankfully, less like boiled urine and more like wood smoke. The sky has shifted to late afternoon, the village paths glowing gold. You shake your head with a smirk. You might spend tomorrow plowing fields again. But today, you've learned one thing. Medieval fashion is less about runway shows and more about surviving winter with only mild itching. And honestly, you'd take scratchy wool over that crocodile dung sunscreen any day. The golden haze of late afternoon softens as bells toll faintly from the village church. Their sound rolls through the air, a reminder that the rhythm of life isn't only fields and looms, it's faith. You drift with the villagers toward the squat stone building, its tower casting a long shadow across the lane. Compared to the Lord's Hall, the church feels less intimidating, but far more important. A place where your soul is weighed as carefully as grain at the mill. You step through the narrow doorway, ducking under a carved arch. Inside, the space is dim, lit mostly by flickering candles and shafts of sunlight slipping through stained glass. The floor is packed earth, strewn with reeds, and the air smells of beeswax, incense, and damp wool from your neighbors' cloaks. Everyone murmurs greetings, then slips into silence. The priest, robed in plain fabric, begins chanting Latin words. You don't understand most of them. Few peasants do. But the rhythm is familiar, comforting, like a lullaby you've heard since birth. Historians still argue whether villagers truly grasped the theology or just followed the motions out of tradition. But for you, the meaning lives more in sound and ritual than in doctrine. You kneel on the hard ground, crossing yourself as the priest swings a censer. Smoke coils up, catching in your throat, and you cough softly. Around you, others close their eyes, whispering prayers for good harvests, healthy children, maybe a little mercy on tax day. The church is a place where worries are poured out like ale into mugs, never quite enough to quench, but better than thirst. After the prayers, villagers spill outside again, blinking in the fading light. But the day isn't done. Tonight is a saint's feast, one of the many festivals sprinkled through the year. You follow the crowd to the village green, where preparations are already underway. Torches are planted in the ground, benches dragged out, and a barrel of ale tapped with satisfying cheers. Someone sets up a makeshift table covered in bread, cheese, and a rare treat, roast goose. Your stomach growls at the smell, richer and sweeter than your usual cabbage stew. Children whirl about with excitement, chasing one another as dogs bark in chaotic chorus. Music begins, pipes and drums thumping, fiddles scraping lively tunes. Couples link arms and spin in clumsy dances, skirts flying, boots stomping in rhythm with the beat. You're pulled into the circle before you can protest, your hands clasped by calloused palms, laughter bubbling around you. You stumble at first, then catch the rhythm, feet pounding the earth in time with everyone else. The ale flows freely, frothy and sharp. You sip from a shared mug, wiping foam from your lip, and laugh at a neighbor who downs his too fast and nearly topples into the fire pit. Quirky tidbit. Villagers sometimes played games like Hoodman Blind, an early version of Blind Man's Bluff, or chased wheels of cheese downhill long before it became a modern sport. Tonight, someone ties a piglet's tail with a ribbon, promising ale to whoever catches it. The sight of half-grown men scrambling after a squealing pig leaves you doubled over with laughter. As the evening deepens, the festival takes on a curious mix of holy and not so holy. The priest blesses the food, but then someone sneaks behind the church to light a bonfire, a tradition that feels older than Christianity. People leap over the flames for luck, cheering when skirts catch sparks. Historians still argue whether these customs were tolerated by the church or barely disguise pagan rituals, but here they blend seamlessly, faith and fun, prayer and play. The music slows into ballads. Minstrels sing of knights and saints, of lost loves and miraculous cures. One song insists a saint once turned water into wine, right here in the village. You raise an eyebrow, wondering if the storyteller had one too many cups of small ale before composing that verse. Children doze in laps, sticky with honey cakes. Old men mutter stories about past festivals, insisting the ale was stronger, the songs louder, the pigs fatter. Everyone nods, knowing nostalgia is the one thing richer than bread. You lean back, belly full, watching sparks whirl up into the night sky. The stars blink above, distant yet familiar. Around you, laughter swells, prayers linger, and the boundaries between sacred and silly blur. Faith here isn't only kneeling in church, it's woven into festivals, games, and the shared warmth of community. And as you sip one last mouthful of ale, you realize something. Even in a world of toil, people always carve out joy. They leap fires, chase pigs, sing off key, and tell saints' tales with a wink. Maybe the priest frowns at the pagan edge of it all, but the villagers smile wider for it. You stretch out your legs, feeling the day's aches fade under firelight. Bells ring faintly again, marking the close of day, but no one rushes home. Tonight belongs to music, stories, and the rare delight of forgetting tomorrow's work. And tomorrow, well, you'll go back to porridge. But tonight, you leap the flames with the others, laughing as sparks dance across your hair, hoping luck and laughter stick to you as tightly as the smell of smoke. The firelight fades, and when dawn creeps back into the village, it brings not just chores, but aches. A child coughs sharply in the next cottage. An old woman hobbles past, with her hand pressed to her side. Illness is as constant as bread here, lurking in the smoky corners of huts, hiding in the muddy water of the well. You join your neighbors in the small square, where women gather with bundles of herbs, each leaf promising hope or, sometimes, just bitter tea. Inside one cottage, the air is thick with pungent smells. Rosemary hanging from the rafters, garlic strung along the wall, nettles drying in baskets. The village healer, a stooped woman with sharp eyes, stirs a pot over the fire. You peer inside, dark liquid, flecked with herbs, bubbling in a way that makes you both hopeful and nervous. She dips a ladle, pours a steaming cup, and offers it to a boy with a fever. He drinks, grimaces, and swallows, the bitterness clinging to his tongue. You notice jars lined on a shelf, honey for wounds, vinegar for cleansing, poppy seeds for pain. Quirky tidbit. Bread mold was sometimes applied to cuts, and while they didn't know it, this primitive trick contained penicillin-like properties. Of course, just as often they'd slap on a mixture of ash and pig fat, which is less effective, let's say. Out in the lane, a man yelps as another villager applies leeches to his arm. The shiny black creatures wriggle greedily, drawing blood. You shudder, but he swears it will balance his humors. Medieval medicine rests on this belief. Health depends on the balance of 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much of one, time for bleeding, purging, or a particularly unpleasant enema. Historians still argue whether most peasants truly understood humoral theory or just went along with whatever the healer ordered. But either way, nobody's getting a second opinion. Nearby, a girl sits with her foot wrapped in cabbage leaves. Another neighbor crushes nettles and presses them against aching joints, insisting the sting draws out pain. You can't help but think it's a medieval version of tough love. Hurts now, hopefully helps later. You wander past a basket filled with dried toads, feathers, and oddly shaped stones. These are charms meant to ward off illness and evil spirits. One mother ties a small bag of herbs around her baby's neck, whispering that it keeps away the evil eye. You raise an eyebrow, but say nothing, because when half your children don't survive past 5, you try everything. At the edge of the crowd, a traveling barber surgeon sharpens his knives. His trade is half haircut, half horror show. He'll pull teeth, set bones, and, if desperate, saw off a limb. You watch as he yanks a rotten tooth from a groaning man, holding it up triumphantly like a trophy. The onlookers cheer, as if he's slain a dragon. You try not to faint. And then there's the priest. He arrives with a small vial of holy water, offering blessings for the sick. Some kneel, hoping faith will heal what herbs cannot. Others mutter that prayer alone won't cure a fever. The overlap of medicine and religion is constant, sometimes cooperative, sometimes in tension. As you stand there, you remember last week's rumor, a woman accused of witchcraft after her neighbor's cow died. She had brewed a potion of nettles and garlic, and when the cow keeled over anyway, fingers pointed. Fear of magic is never far from medicine, especially when cures fail. Still, not everything feels grim. Children laugh as they crush mint leaves to rub on their skin, pretending it's perfume. A man swears by strong ale as his only medicine, 2 cups for the cough, 3 for the soul. And in truth, you feel better after a sip yourself. The healer beckons you to try a concoction for your aching back. She hands you a cup steaming with chamomile and willow bark. The taste is sharp, earthy, but not unpleasant. Willow, she says, eases pain, something modern science agrees with, since it contains the basis of aspirin. You finish it, unsure whether relief comes from the herb or just from the warmth slipping through your chest. As the day wears on, you help gather herbs in the hedgerows. Yarrow for cuts, elderflower for colds, sage for sore throats. Each plant carries both use and story, some tied to saints, others to superstition. You tuck sprigs of rosemary into your belt, half for healing, half for the comforting smell. By dusk, the sick are resting, the healer is weary, and the village has settled into its fragile balance again. Illness may strike without warning, but life goes on, stitched together by herbs, prayers, and stubborn will. You stretch, grateful your cough hasn't worsened, and smirk at the thought that one day people will have pills instead of leeches. But for now, you'll trust in honey, nettles, and the occasional mug of ale. After all, if it doesn't heal you, at least it makes you forget for a while. And honestly, forgetting might be the best medicine of all. As you stand there, you remember last week's rumor, a woman accused of witchcraft after her neighbor's cow died. She had brewed a potion of nettles and garlic, and when the cow keeled over anyway, fingers pointed. Fear of magic is never far from medicine, especially when cures fail. Still, not everything feels grim. Children laugh as they crush mint leaves to rub on their skin, pretending it's perfume. A man swears by strong ale as his only medicine, 2 cups for the cough, 3 for the soul. And in truth, you feel better after a sip yourself. The healer beckons you to try a concoction for your aching back. She hands you a cup steaming with chamomile and willow bark. The taste is sharp, earthy, but not unpleasant. Willow, she says, eases pain, something modern science agrees with, since it contains the basis of aspirin. You finish it, unsure whether relief comes from the herb or just from the warmth slipping through your chest. As the day wears on, you help gather herbs in the hedgerows. Yarrow for cuts, elderflower for colds, sage for sore throats. Each plant carries both use and story, some tied to saints, others to superstition. You tuck sprigs of rosemary into your belt, half for healing, half for the comforting smell. By dusk, the sick are resting, the healer is weary, and the village has settled into its fragile balance again. Illness may strike without warning, but life goes on, stitched together by herbs, prayers, and stubborn will. You stretch, grateful your cough hasn't worsened, and smirk at the thought that one day people will have pills instead of leeches. But for now, you'll trust in honey, nettles, and the occasional mug of ale. After all, if it doesn't heal you, at least it makes you forget for a while. And honestly, forgetting might be the best medicine of all. The evening bell tolls again, not for prayer this time, but for order. A crowd gathers in the village square, and you find yourself swept along with the current of neighbors, muttering, curious, anxious. Today, the Lord Steward is holding court, which means a mix of justice, gossip, and theater, equal parts fear and entertainment. You arrive to see a makeshift bench set up beneath the old elm tree. The steward sits sternly, quill and parchment in hand, while the reeve hovers nearby, ready to drag forward anyone unlucky enough to be accused. The villagers circle around, whispering excitedly. Justice here is as much about being seen as it is about being fair. The first case is petty. A farmer accused of letting his pigs wander into a neighbor's field. The pigs apparently ate half the cabbages before being chased out. The steward listens, stroking his chin, then finds the farmer 2 pennies. The crowd snickers as the man grumbles, shoving coins into the steward's palm. You can almost hear the silent relief from everyone else. Better him than me. Next, a woman is accused of selling watered-down ale at the last market. Her neighbors nod vigorously, swearing it tasted like ditch water. The steward scolds her sharply, declaring that ale should be honest and strong, and orders her to spend an hour in the stocks tomorrow as a warning. You picture her sitting there while children throw turnips at her head and suppress a laugh. Medieval Yelp reviews were brutal. Then comes something heavier. A young man stands accused of stealing a goose. Yes, probably the same unlucky goose that raised havoc in the market. The bird honks loudly in a cage nearby, as if testifying against him. The villagers roar with laughter, but the steward is less amused. Stealing livestock is serious business. After some debate, the man is sentenced to a whipping. You wince as you imagine the sting, the humiliation, the weeks of gossip that will follow. Justice here is public, loud, and meant to sting more in pride than in flesh. Stocks, fines, shaming, punishments designed to remind everyone watching what not to do. Quirky tidbit. Sometimes offenders were forced to carry a heavy stone through the village as a punishment. It was less about the pain and more about the embarrassment of looking foolish. You shift in the crowd as another case unfolds. A villager accuses his neighbor of calling him a thief during a drunken brawl. Insults, it turns out, can be as dangerous as blows. The steward sighs, clearly tired, and fines both men for disturbing the peace. Everyone chuckles. It's the medieval equivalent of take it outside. Historians still argue whether these village courts truly upheld justice or merely reinforced the Lord's control. After all, the fines mostly flow back into his coffers. But for the villagers, it's also entertainment, a chance to see neighbors squirm, to gossip afterward, to feel, just for a moment, that fairness might exist. When the session ends, attention shifts to the stocks themselves, already occupied by yesterday's offender, a boy who threw stones at the church windows. He sits with his head and hands locked in place, looking both bored and mortified. Children giggle as they toss cabbage leaves at him, while his mother scolds anyone who throws too hard. You shake your head, amused and slightly sympathetic. As the crowd disperses, gossip sparks like fire across the lanes. Someone swears the ale seller deserved harsher punishment. Another insists the goose thief should have lost a hand. And an old woman mutters darkly that justice favors the ones with pennies to spare. You can't help but nod. Coin often tips the scales more than truth. You linger by the stocks a moment longer. The boy trapped inside sighs loudly, begging someone to scratch his nose. A girl obliges by flicking his ear instead. Everyone bursts out laughing, and for a moment, the grim weight of punishment lightens into slapstick comedy. As the sun sets, you walk home, the echoes of judgment still humming in your ears. Law here isn't written in books or argued by lawyers. It's lived out loud, in the dirt, in front of your neighbors. Your reputation can rise or collapse in an afternoon, and you realize, with a small shiver, that in a world this small, gossip is as dangerous as crime. A goose can condemn you, an insult can cost you, and one slip of ale too watery might land you in the stocks. Justice is part survival, part spectacle, part comedy. Show you can't turn away from. You rub your arms against the chill, muttering a silent promise to keep your pigs out of other people's gardens, to keep your ale thick, and to never, ever steal a goose. Unless, of course, you can outrun it. The laughter of yesterday's court lingers in memory, but today the mood shifts. Clouds crawl across the sky, thick and heavy, their bellies swollen with rain. You wake to the sound of wind rattling the shutters, and when you step outside, the world feels smaller, wrapped in gray. The path is already slick with mud, the chickens huddled under eaves, feathers plastered with damp. The storm doesn't hold back. Sheets of rain pound the fields, flattening young shoots, turning furrows into brown rivers. You stand at the edge of your strip of land, heart sinking as water pools where grain should grow. A neighbor mutters beside you, cursing the heavens. Another insists, this is the price for the village's sins. Someone else swears it's the Lord's fault for raising rents last season, because clearly even the weather listens to taxes. The storm drags on for days. The river swells, spilling into pastures. Sheep bleat miserably on higher ground, and a cow drowns in the flood, its body washed up against a fence. You help pull it free, gagging at the smell already rising from the carcass. The family who owns it weeps. Losing a cow is like losing treasure, meat, and milk all at once. By the time the rains ease, the damage is done. Fields are ruined, grain rotted in the ground. You scrape mud from your shoes and wonder how long the stores will last. Grain bins in the cottages are already thin, and the Lord's tithe hasn't even been collected yet. You imagine his steward arriving with outstretched hands, demanding sacks that no longer exist. As days pass, hunger gnaws sharper, meals shrink. The porridge is thinner, the bread sliced smaller. Mothers slip food to children while pretending they're not hungry themselves. You bite into a crust that's half chaff, half flour, and chew as if it's a feast. Historians still argue whether medieval famines struck more from bad weather, war, or sheer mismanagement. But here in the village, the cause doesn't matter. Hunger is hunger. You hear whispers of entire families eating roots, bark, even grass to survive. One man jokes grimly that boiled shoe leather makes a fine stew. Nobody laughs. The fear seeps deeper. Whispers begin, superstition stirred by empty stomachs. One woman mutters that her neighbor cursed the fields with an envious glance. Another swears she saw a witch's shadow dancing in the storm clouds. A child points to a crooked old woman and whispers, "Hag." The healer, who just last week gave you willow bark for pain, now walks under suspicious stares. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, people carried charms like dried weasel paws to ward off famine and witchcraft. You glance at your empty belt and wish superstition could fill your belly. At night, hunger dreams visit. You lie awake on straw, imagining loaves so light they float. stews thick with venison and herbs. You roll over, your stomach growling loud enough to wake the chickens. Someone mutters in the dark hut, "Maybe the saints will send rain again, but kinder this time." You doubt it. The worst part isn't just hunger, it's the waiting. Every dawn you walk the fields, hoping for a miracle sprout, and every day the soil stares back, barren. You watch children chase frogs in the ditches, catching them to roast on sticks. The smell makes your mouth water, though you know frogs hardly fill the belly. And then the priest speaks from the pulpit, voice booming in the damp church. "Repent, for our sins brought this famine." He urges fasting, prayer, more offerings. You exchange glances with your neighbors. Fasting when you're already starving feels like a cruel joke. Still, some kneel, lips moving desperately. Others slip out, eyes hard, muttering that prayer won't cook a meal. On the third week, the first death comes. A thin old man, his ribs sharp under his skin, collapses in the lane. People gather silently, heads bowed. He is buried quickly, the ground still soggy from rain. There are no grand rites, just a few words, a shovel, and the haunting reminder that hunger can hollow anyone. That night, the fear deepens. You hear whispers in the dark about witch trials, about chasing away the cursed. Historians still argue whether these scapegoats truly relieve tension or only worsen despair. But in the tense silence of a hungry village, suspicion spreads faster than fire. Yet even here, humor limps along. Someone quips that if the goose thief were smart, he'd strike again now. This time, the village would crown him a hero. A ripple of laughter breaks the gloom, thin but real. You laugh too, even as your stomach twists. The storm has passed, but its shadow lingers. You sit at the edge of the fields, mud still clinging to your boots, staring at the drowned furrows. The wind carries the faint scent of rot and smoke. Somewhere a child cries, and somewhere else, an ox lows hungrily. You close your eyes, wishing for spring, for sun, for a harvest that will not come. And as the night draws in, you understand the cruel truth. In this world, survival is not promised. Food can vanish with a storm, and hope can vanish with it. All that remains is to endure, together, through famine, fear, and the fragile comfort of dark humor. The famine's shadow lingers, but even hunger cannot choke out the need for stories. When work ends and darkness pools thick around the cottages, villagers gather near the hearth or in the green, chasing warmth, light, and a little distraction. You follow the flicker of torches drawn by the hum of music. Tonight, there's a minstrel in town. He sits cross-legged with a lute balanced across his knees, strings twanging sharp and sweet in the smoky night air. Children settle cross-legged at his feet, eyes wide, while adults hover behind, mugs of ale in hand, leaning against posts or each other. The first notes cut through the gloom like sparks, and soon the square is alive with rhythm. The songs tell of knights and saints, of battles won and dragons slain. Some verses are lofty, others downright bawdy, slipping in sly jokes that make the younger boys snicker, while the priest pretends not to hear. One tale insists a maiden turned into a swan to escape her jealous husband. Another claims a saint wrestled the devil himself in a cabbage patch. You raise an eyebrow. Historians still argue whether these traveling tales reflect any truth, or were just early versions of Netflix binge material. But for the crowd, truth matters less than the thrill of hearing them. The music fades and someone else takes up the mantle. An old woman with a voice cracked but steady. She recites riddles. the kind that make children squirm and adults smirk. What has roots as nobody sees is taller than trees. She pauses, waiting, and the crowd shouts guesses until someone blurts, "A mountain!" and she cackles, clapping her hands. Even hunger seems to loosen in laughter. Later, when the minstrel rests, neighbors share their own tales. A shepherd swears he once saw a will-o'-the-wisp dancing over the marsh, luring him nearly to his death. A woman interrupts to say she's certain the marsh spirits are really the souls of unbaptized children crying for rest. A chill runs down your spine as the fire crackles lower. Someone stokes the flames, and shadows leap across the thatched roofs. You sip from a shared mug of ale, savoring the bitter comfort. Quirky tidbit. Alehouse stories often grew more outrageous as mugs emptied, leading to tall tales that stretched as far as the night was long. By the time the second barrel's half gone, you've heard of a dog that speaks French and a rooster that once crowed so loud it toppled a church bell. Then the mood shifts darker. A farmer tells of seeing black shapes on the hill, figures moving without lantern or sound. He swears they vanished when he called out. The crowd shivers. Another mutters that wolves have been sighted again. Wolves are real, hungry, and far scarier than ghosts when your livestock are thin from famine. The priest steps forward, trying to steer the mood, reminding everyone that faith guards the soul. He leads a hymn, voices rising thinly in the cold. But once he retreats, the stories start again, this time quieter, more dangerous. Tales of witches who curse cows, demons who lurk by crossroads, and restless spirits wandering graveyards. You pull your cloak tighter, the fire's warmth not enough to chase the chill crawling down your back. One boy leans in close to whisper a monster story. How a headless rider gallops the forest road at midnight, searching for his lost skull. His grin is mischievous, but his eyes dart nervously to the dark tree line beyond the cottages. You grin back, but you find yourself glancing too. Historians still argue whether such folklore was entertainment or deeply believed. But as you sit in the smoky firelight, listening to voices blur fact and fear, it's hard not to feel the weight of belief pressing in. In a world without streetlights, with forests stretching endless and dark, monsters feel close enough to brush your sleeve. Yet, even in the chill, laughter returns. A neighbor tells a joke about a monk so pious he refused to swat fleas, until one bit him in the eye, and he declared it possessed by the devil. Everyone howls, slapping their knees, scratching reflexively. You laugh too, the tension breaking like kindling underfoot. The fire burns lower, the minstrel hums a lullaby, and children droop against their parents' laps. You lean back, staring at the night sky dotted with stars. The hunger, the fear, the gossip, all fade for a moment under the spell of music and story. And as you drift with the crowd back toward your hut, straw bed calling, you realize, in this village, stories are more than entertainment. They're medicine for the mind, armor for the soul, and sometimes warnings tucked into riddles. Tomorrow, you'll face the fields again, the steward, the storms. But tonight, you carry a head full of dragons, saints, and riddles into sleep. And honestly, it beats dreaming of porridge. The fire-lit stories fade into memory. And the next morning, the village hums with a different sort of chatter, quieter, slyer, punctuated with giggles and sidelong glances. You soon realize why. A marriage is being arranged. Courtship here is rarely about stolen kisses under the stars. It's more often parents haggling like they're trading cows. because in a way they are. You join the group gathered near the green. Two families stand stiffly, negotiating. The groom-to-be, a red-faced lad with shoulders broad from plowing, shifts uncomfortably beside his father. The bride-to-be, a pale girl with downcast eyes, fiddles with the corner of her veil. Neither speaks. Their parents do the talking, voices rising and falling as they argue over dowry. Chickens, a small strip of land, 2 sacks of barley. These aren't just gifts, they're investments in survival. The priest hovers nearby, nodding solemnly, waiting for his role. Marriage is both holy sacrament and social contract, and he makes sure everyone remembers the holy part while the parents wrestle with the social. Historians still argue whether peasants had much choice in their partners, or if marriages were almost always arranged by families. Standing here, watching the two youths studiously avoid each other's gaze, you'd bet heavily on the latter. As negotiations drag on, villagers whisper and joke. Someone mutters that the lad snores loud enough to wake the saints, while another says the girl once dropped a loaf of bread straight into the pig pen. Everyone chuckles because nothing in a small village stays secret, and weddings are everyone's business. Finally, the deal is struck. A handshake, a muttered prayer, and the couple is bound, whether they like it or not. The priest announces the banns will be read in church for 3 weeks, just in case anyone knows of a reason the marriage shouldn't happen. Like, say, if the groom already promised himself to another, or if the couple are cousins a little too closely related. Quirky tidbit. Medieval law often required those banns to prevent accidental incest, which was more common than you'd think when half the village shares the same handful of ancestors. Later, you attend the wedding feast. The church is decorated with sprigs of greenery, the priest's voice solemn as he blesses the couple. Then everyone spills back out into the village, where the ale flows and the tables groan with food. Bread, cheese, stewed beans, even a rare roasted lamb. You pile a plate, trying not to look too greedy, though your stomach growls like a drum. Music strikes up again, pipes, fiddles, and drums pounding fast rhythms. Guests clap, stamp, and sing bawdy songs. The newlyweds are shoved into the center, urged to dance. The lad stumbles over his bride's hem, nearly toppling them both. The crowd erupts in laughter, the tension of the morning melting into merriment. Even the priest chuckles, though he quickly crosses himself afterward. Then comes the teasing. Villagers follow the couple through the village, shouting jokes, banging pots, and making all sorts of racket. A ritual meant to embarrass them and ensure fertility. You laugh so hard your sides ache, watching a group of children throw flower petals one moment and chicken feathers the next. Historians still argue about the origins of these noisy customs, some calling them remnants of pagan fertility rites. Whatever their source, they certainly leave the couple blushing. As night deepens, the revelry grows rowdier. Someone starts a drinking contest, another challenges his neighbor to a wrestling match right in the mud. You sip your ale, shaking your head at the chaos. A barrel tips, a man falls headlong into it, and everyone howls with laughter. Medieval weddings, it seems, are equal parts piety and party. Eventually, the crowd herds the couple toward their cottage. Someone tosses a shoe after them for luck. Others wedge themselves at the door, demanding proof that the marriage is properly sealed. You cough and look away, cheeks burning, while the braver villagers roar with teasing shouts. Privacy in this village is a rare commodity. When the door finally shuts, the crowd disperses, still chuckling. You walk home, belly warm with ale, head buzzing with music and laughter. Yet a small thought lingers. For all the merriment, marriage here is less romance and more survival. Alliances of land, labor, and dowry. Love may grow, but it's not the seed from which the match begins. Still, you smile at the memory of the bride's shy glance during the dance, the way her lips quirked into the smallest of smiles. Maybe, just maybe, in between the contracts and chickens, love can sneak in after all. And if not, at least there's plenty of ale to soften the edges. The echoes of wedding songs fade, but children's voices soon rise to fill the air. You step outside one morning and see a gang of youngsters chasing each other across the muddy lane, shrieking with delight, their bare feet slapping the earth. One holds a hoop made of bent willow, rolling it ahead with a stick while the others race to catch it. Another girl hops across chalked squares scratched in the dirt, shouting triumphantly when she doesn't topple. Their laughter cuts through the village's toil, a reminder that even in hard times, play finds a way. But childhood here is brief, so brief it feels like a borrowed season. By the time most children are 7 or 8, their games are mixed with chores. That boy with the hoop will soon drive geese to pasture. The girl with the chalked squares will carry water from the well, bucket handles biting into her palms. You follow a group heading toward the fields. Small bodies bend low to scatter seed, their giggles breaking into complaints when the sacks feel too heavy. One child swings a stick to chase crows. Another balances precariously on a fence post to keep watch. You can't help but chuckle at their energy, though you wince knowing it burns out fast in a world where food is scarce. Historians still argue whether medieval parents were affectionate or distant. But as you watch a mother wipe porridge from her toddler's cheek with her sleeve, then kiss the sticky face, it's hard to imagine love being absent. Harshness, yes. Discipline, certainly. But affection too. Worn rough like everything else here. The children's toys are simple, often homemade. A rag doll stuffed with straw, a carved wooden horse with one missing leg, dice whittled from bone. You pick one up, rolling it across your palm, and wonder how many tiny hands have thrown it, cheering wins or pouting at losses. Quirky tidbit. Children sometimes played with pigs' bladders, blown up like balloons or used as makeshift balls. The laughter that follows such games is always half joy, half disgust, especially when the bladder bursts spectacularly. As evening settles, you find yourself sitting near a hearth where children cluster, listening wide-eyed to an elder's tale. The story is dark, about a wolf that steals naughty children who wander too far from home. The little ones cling to their mothers, eyes huge, but you catch the smirk on the elder's lips. Fear is a lesson here, woven into bedtime stories just as firmly as wonder. Still, not all is play. You notice how thin some children look, ribs showing, hair pale from poor diet. A boy coughs, chest rattling, and his mother hushes him with a worried glance. Infant mortality is high. Every parent knows loss, though they rarely speak of it. Life expectancy hovers low, and many children never live long enough to see adulthood. The laughter of today might fade tomorrow, but that makes it all the more precious. Older children carry heavier burdens. A boy of 12 swings an axe to split wood, his motions clumsy but determined. A girl kneels at the loom, fingers working stiff yarn, while her mother corrects her posture. They are already stepping into adult roles, apprentices to survival. By 14, many are married or apprenticed, childhood gone like smoke from a hearth. One evening, you stumble upon a circle of children playing hot cockles. One kneels, blindfolded, while others take turns striking his back lightly. He must guess who hit him. The laughter is wild, though the game stings more than most. You shake your head, half amused, half horrified. Medieval fun often walks a thin line between game and punishment. Later, as you lie on your straw bed, you remember the games, the giggles, the squeals. You wonder what futures these children face. How many will grow old? How many will be claimed by fever or famine? Historians still argue whether medieval childhood was recognized as a distinct stage of life or simply an apprenticeship for adulthood. But watching them, muddy and laughing, you feel certain. Childhood here is real, fleeting, and fierce. And even in this world of toil and scarcity, the sound of children's laughter echoes against the dark like the most stubborn song of hope. So, when dawn comes again, you step into the lane with a smile, grateful that even if porridge is thin, joy still bounces like a hoop rolled down a muddy path. The laughter of children fades into the silence of the churchyard, where a small procession winds slowly between crooked wooden crosses. You follow at a respectful distance, the weight of the moment settling heavy in the cool air. A bell tolls low and solemn, each note stretching long, as though the whole village is forced to breathe slower. At the front, the priest walks with a crucifix held high, his robe brushing the damp grass. Behind him, villagers carry a wooden bier. On it lies the shrouded body of an old woman, wrapped tightly in linen, face veiled, hands folded. The smell of incense drifts, clinging to the woolen cloaks of the mourners. Children hush their chatter, sensing the seriousness even if they don't understand the finality. You reach the open grave, a dark rectangle of raw earth. The priest chants prayers in Latin, words you don't fully grasp, but whose rhythm sinks into your chest like a slow heartbeat. Requiem aeternam. The villagers cross themselves. Some weep softly, others stare with blank resignation. Death here isn't rare, it's a constant companion. The shroud is lowered, ropes creaking, earth scattering over linen with dull thuds. You watch as neighbors step forward, tossing in handfuls of soil or sprigs of rosemary. Quirky tidbit. Rosemary was thought to guard the soul, its sharp scent a bridge between the living and the dead. You kneel, drop a twig, and whisper a prayer that feels clumsy on your lips. The burial is simple, but grief is shared. You see the widow's son squeeze her hand, another villager offer bread for the family's table. Community binds tighter in loss. And yet, as people shuffle away, you hear murmurs. She died of the fever. No, it was old age. Perhaps a curse? Whispers of blame creep in like weeds among flowers. Back in the square, the conversation lingers. Some insist the dead rest peacefully. Others claim restless spirits wander, if not buried properly. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly feared ghosts or used the stories to explain grief and guilt. Either way, you can feel the fear is real, especially at night. Later, by firelight, stories turn morbid. Someone swears a pale figure walks the lane where a drowned man was buried. Another insists candles flickered out by themselves last night. Surely a soul passing through. A boy blurts out a tale of corpses rising to knock on doors. The adults laugh uneasily, shushing him, but you notice how tightly they clutch their mugs. You lie awake on your straw bed, listening to the wind rattle the shutters, heart quickening at every creak. Death is never far, whether from hunger, sickness, or sheer accident. You remember yesterday's game of hot cockles, children laughing, striking each other lightly. Today, silence. Tomorrow, who knows? Still, death isn't only fear. For some, it is hope. The priest preaches heaven, a land of milk and honey where suffering ends. For others, it's uncertainty. You overhear a neighbor whisper, "Will her soul reach heaven?" Or linger here. Historians still argue about how strongly peasants believed in purgatory, but the flickering candles on home altars suggest they believed enough to pray constantly. One man claims he once saw a soul rise as a flame, drifting skyward. Another woman tells of hearing her dead husband's voice in the wind, whispering her name. You shiver, glancing at the shadows. Whether true or not, the stories root themselves in your mind. The next day you pass the graveyard again. A thin mist curls among the crosses. You pause, listening. For a moment, you almost expect to hear voices, gentle, insistent, just beyond your reach. Instead, there's only silence and the rustle of crows. You bow your head, whispering a clumsy farewell to the old woman, then walk on. Death here is ordinary, but never easy. It carves holes in families. It sparks gossip and fear. It shapes belief and ritual. And yet, life continues. Children still play. Looms still clatter. Bells still toll. You carry the weight of loss alongside everyone else. A reminder that in a medieval village, grief isn't private. It's shared. You smile faintly at the thought. Maybe that's why ghost stories thrive here. They let the dead linger among the living, if only in whispers. And as you step back into the village lane, the sound of laughter slowly returning, you realize that in this world, death doesn't end the story. It simply becomes another tale told by firelight. The year winds down, and you feel it in your bones. The air is crisp, carrying the tang of wood smoke, and the fields lie bare, furrows dark and resting under the pale sky. Life in the village is slower now. Not easy, never easy, but measured. The cycle of toil, feast, hunger, and laughter has spun full circle, and you've walked each step with your neighbors. In the mornings, frost paints the cottages silver. You wake, breath visible in the cold, pulling your scratchy wool tunic tighter. Outside, men gather wood, splitting logs with steady thuds, while women spread straw in animal pens to keep them warm. Children scamper about, their laughter puffing clouds of white into the air. In the evenings, you sit by the hearth, listening to the familiar crackle of fire. Someone stirs a pot of thin pottage, the smell of onions and leeks filling the room. You dip your bread into the broth, chewing slowly, savoring the heat more than the taste. Meals are sparse, but shared warmth makes them bearable. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers felt trapped in these cycles or comforted by them. From where you sit, it feels like both. The predictability is a balm, knowing that winter leads to spring, that sowing leads to harvest, that grief is followed by laughter. Yet, it's also a chain. No matter how many years turn, the tasks remain the same. You remember the year's moments vividly. The goose thief at the market, the children's games, the leap over the festival fire, the storm that drowned the fields. Each memory is stitched into the fabric of village life, like threads woven unevenly into cloth. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval tapestries actually included tiny scenes of daily life hidden in the margins. Peasants drinking, children playing, just as your own year has been framed by small, almost hidden joys. As you walk the village lanes one last time, you pass the churchyard, the manor, the market stalls now shuttered for the season. Everything feels quieter, subdued, yet not lifeless. You see smoke curl from chimneys, hear the faint bark of a dog, catch the smell of freshly baked bread from a cottage. The cycle continues. Night falls, and you gather once more with your neighbors. A minstrel plucks at a lute, his song softer this time, more wistful than wild. Children lean against their parents, drowsy, while old men nod into their mugs. The stories tonight are gentler, of saints watching over sleepers, of spring already waiting beneath the frost. You close your eyes, letting the firelight blur into dream. And as the seasons fold in on themselves, you realize the truth of this village life. It isn't grand or heroic, but it is steady, shared, and deeply human. Work and rest, hunger and feast, sorrow and laughter. They turn like the wheel of the year, always returning, always familiar. The cycle carries you forward, one footstep at a time, into another dawn, another season, another year. Now, the fire burns lower, its glow softening into embers. The air in the cottage feels warmer, gentler, as if the walls themselves sigh in relief. You lean back on the straw mattress, listening to the muted hum of life outside. An owl calling in the distance, the faint shuffle of animals settling in their pens, the whisper of wind against thatch. Your eyes grow heavy, not from weariness alone, but from the calm that comes after a year of toil and survival. Each sound around you feels slower, stretched, softened. The crackle of the last log fades into a hushed rhythm, like a lullaby played on wood and flame. The villagers, too, are resting, children curled close to their parents, farmers with calloused hands folded on their chests, women with strands of hair falling across tired faces, all sinking into sleep, trusting that the cycle of dawn and dusk will carry them forward. Life here may be hard, but in this quiet moment, it feels safe, familiar, even tender. You imagine the seasons turning softly, spring already stirring beneath the earth, green shoots ready to break through frost. Time, here, is less a line than a circle, gentle and endless. You feel yourself held by it, cradled in the rhythm of sowing, reaping, feasting, grieving, laughing, and always, always continuing. So, breathe deeply now. Let the smoke and straw, the faint echo of songs and stories wrap around you. Let the weight of the year drift away, replaced by a steady calm. Close your eyes. Picture the fields in bloom, the bells ringing in the morning air, the laughter of neighbors drifting down the lane. Sleep comes softly, and the village keeps watch. Good night.